All right, here we go. All right, what's up, guys? Roy here. You're at the Clemenz with a Z podcast. Got another episode in the We Were in a Cult series where I talked to former members of the ICOC, International Churches of Christ, to kind of discuss this wild thing we were in. Was it a cult? Was it not a cult? I don't know. It was a wild ride, and we're just gonna have a conversation about it. And I got former member TJ here. TJ, why don't you say hi?
How you doing, guys?
Yeah, we'll get into it. All right, man. Welcome. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having
doing this. Yeah, man. So let's get right into it. How'd you get involved in the church? Were you a kingdom kid or were you met?
me. Oh man, I was met. Long story short, I moved high schools going into my freshman year of high school.
Huh?
I grew up in a town up in Massachusetts and grew up there my entire life. And then 2 weeks before high school, I found out that I was going to another high school. And coincidentally, on the first day of school at orientation, I met a girl that had gone to the ICOC. She was new to the school, and so we kind of connected on that. And throughout high school, I was not religious. Like I didn't really grow up religious at all. But there was just something about her that was just different. And we stayed friends
Yeah.
throughout high school. I went to like, I think maybe two teen events, but I was not your Christian dude at all. There was always something I felt there with God, but I was I was not anywhere close to being involved with God. And then my freshman year of college, I went through a pretty hard breakup and was away at school and going through a lot of other emotional and psychological things. And got invited to an event up in Boston that Arrested Development and Speech were performing.
They
And
performed at everything in our church once he became
they
a Christian.
they did well. I had listened to Arrested Development growing up.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
when they invited me to come up, and they're like, Arrested Development's playing, it's free. Why don't you come up? I was going to school in Providence, Rhode Island at the time. I was like, what? Arrested Development? Like, how do you guys get tickets to that? Like, yeah, I'll come up. And so I came up and ended up meeting, one of my now best friends there. And yeah, I guess the rest is history. That's how my journey into the church started.
It's wild that you were met by a girl. That was
I was
something that was
technically met by a girl, yes.
usually that wasn't how it works. When we
No,
would go share a faith, you were not going to go up to girls and do it, or the opposite sex. So that's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, no, and I wouldn't say they were sharing my faith. They're sharing their faith per se, but uh,
Uh,
yeah, I guess you could say because at some point they did invite me out to a teen event. I think I went snowboarding.
that's anyway, that's funny. So you said you weren't religious, so you didn't have really like your view of God was probably like standard, what everybody thought of.
Yeah, I mean, we went to church on like I grew up with a single mom. My mom and I are more like brother and sister. She had me really young.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we did the standard like Easter and maybe one other time during the year. And she got married when I was 9, and from 9 to 14, she was married, and my stepfather's brothers were both Christians. And so then we went to church like a few more times.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I used to fight her when I'd have to get up on Sundays to go to church. Like, so I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, we don't go to church. Like, why are we all of a sudden going to church? Like, I don't want to go to church. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah.
So you get so your freshman year of college, you decide you watch Arrested Development and you're like or you see them on stage and then you're like, okay, this is for me. I'm gonna get baptized. If speech is there, I'm gonna be there.
That's it, man. That's it. No, it was a time in my life, honestly, Roy, that I was so lost.
Huh?
Um, and I was searching for something. I knew I was searching for something. And that weekend, what I felt and saw that weekend, I saw a sense of I could just be who I was
Yeah.
and not really worry about anyone judging me.
Hmm.
Uh, I grew up feeling if I was a very talented athlete, and at that I didn't end up playing sports in college, and I feel like my whole identity was wrapped up in sports. And when that was gone, I didn't feel like I was good enough in anything else in life. Sports was the only thing I ever felt good at in life. I felt like I sucked at everything else, and I was the worst person like outside of sports. And that weekend, being around people my age and being at that event and then hanging out, I was just in an environment where I felt like, wow, I don't have to be anything, and these people accept me and like me.
Yeah.
And then, I met who was now one of my best friends. He was the best man at my wedding. And we just talked, like we kept in touch after that weekend. And he was probably one of the most real people I had ever met up to that point. And he started telling me about God and sharing with me about God and inviting me to Devos and coming back up to Boston to go to a Devo. And it was like every time I came up, I felt like, wow, this is incredible. Like there's something here.
Mhm.
And because of the way I grew up, I had made a vow to myself at 16 years old, believe it or not. I remember exactly where I was in my room. I had made a vow to myself that I wanted to break the generational curses that were in my family. And I
Mm.
knew in the back of my mind that if I was going to do that, I needed to figure out some sets of morals to live by or principles to live by. And when I found that weekend and talking to this guy, I was like, it was almost like a light bulb went off in my head. It was like, this is it. Like, this is what I need. Like,
Hmm.
this is what I'm looking for. Um, yeah.
And that's crazy that so how far is Providence from Boston?
Oh man, I think I drove an hour and a half. Um, and there, and
Oh,
I
it's
would
only an
take,
hour and a half?
yeah, I would take a bus up sometimes though.
Oh,
Like
okay.
there was a couple of weekends where I ended up taking a bus up. Um,
I just I
yeah,
don't I think everything up there is so far away,
no,
but
it's not.
it's relatively close, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's not bad.
Um, that's cool. So you end up studying the Bible. Did you like leave the school or did you like leave Providence and move to Boston to study, or was it just a continuation of just moving back and forth?
Yeah, no, it was we basically studied back and forth. I'd come up like I don't know how many weekends in a row. I ended up going up to Boston. Um, and then my second semester in January, I ended up leaving the school I was at and moving up to Boston.
Yeah.
And was up there permanently.
And so what was studying the Bible like for you, like having, no real background and then getting into this? Because we were at the time when I just say that because I was talking to someone earlier today who, when she got met and joined the church, they didn't have the studies like we had. So
Yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah, I was eating it up. I ate it all up.
Hmm.
Because I was, like I said, I was at a point in life where I was hungry for something more. Like I was hungry for something deeper. Like I come from a background where I saw divorce all around me. I saw drug and alcohol abuse all around me. There was domestic violence that I had seen, as a child. Like, so you have to understand like the environment that I came from and then being introduced to this
Uh-huh.
and introduced to God and introduced to the scriptures. I at the time like I was like, man, this is deep. This is
Uh-huh.
incredible. This all makes sense. And I honestly I did. I ate it up. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And it wasn't. I didn't feel this sense of pressure per se,
Hmm.
uh, until there was a point where in the studies where my ex-girlfriend and I got our relationship got brought up, and it was like, you if you're gonna do this, like, and get baptized, like, you really have to cut it off with her.
Oh, you were
Um,
dating someone at the time.
yeah, we ended
Yeah,
up
that's
getting
right.
back together. We were dating, and this was someone I had
Oh,
dated for 2 years in high school, and then we were still together. So we've been together for about like 3 years. And it was serious. We were very, very serious. I was very in love with her. And um, and so that was the only point that I questioned, like, wow, this is really, I don't know about this, like, I don't know.
uh-huh.
Um,
And that was the thing, though. If you were with someone and you were studying the Bible and they weren't at the church, I mean, it was, that was a big dividing line. I mean, I remember in campus, two people, this guy and this girl got met and they were dating outside the church and they broke up when they were studying the Bible because you had to make sure you were serious and you weren't there just for the other person.
yeah. So yes,
Yeah.
and so we did. Um,
Uh-huh.
it was, maybe we'll get into that, but that situation is when I started questioning things very hard
Uh-huh.
about the church and about the ministry. Um, because it long story short, we ended up sort of going on a pause.
Uh-huh.
I got baptized. Coincidentally, like 6 months later, she ended up getting studying the Bible and getting baptized. We got back
Oh.
together once we were baptized. And this is where it started getting like weird for me. And I started questioning things. We ended up getting there, I got talked to of like, you guys can't spend this time together. Like, you have to go on double dates. Like, our campus minister, was, we need to be there with you guys. Which is,
Yeah.
dude, that's not the world I come from, right? Like, we were,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll, we were having sex at, when we were sophomores in high school, right? Like,
Yeah. Hmm.
and it wasn't like this, pure relationship, obviously. And so that was like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, double dates? Like, we can't be alone together? Like, what are you? I was staying in her dorm room. Like, I would stay in her dorm room. I would stay over her house, even my senior year of high school in the weekends. Like, and so, I was like, what is this? Like, there's no way, right? And then come to find out, what ended up happening, man, was our campus ministers basically called us together, had us over for dinner. And what ended up happening was they basically sat us down and essentially told us we needed to break up with each other. And the way it was put was that I wanted to break up with her, and that I didn't think it was good for me spiritually anymore. And it was one of those situations where I was like, I didn't know what to say, because
Uh-huh.
that had come from a conversation that I had had with one of the campus ministers, and had said, I had
Oh.
had a conversation with him and just said, like, yeah, this is hard. Like, this is hard to be pure, like, to stay pure, and what ended up happening in that conversation was they basically broke broke it off for us, I guess you would say.
Oh,
Uh,
man.
yeah, and then that was a snowball after that, where I look back now, and there was some shady stuff that they had done, where
But
we
it's
could
it
see each other. Um, we were told by each other's discipleship partners that, like, the other one wanted to go on different dates with other people. We never said that. Like, we never wanted to. Neither one of us wanted to do that. Yeah.
Man.
So that's where it started getting a little weird for me. Was going through that stuff.
And stuff like that was happening lots of times. Things would get used against you, like stuff that you said would get used against you. I don't know. Luckily, I never felt I had a couple of guys that I could confide in that I always felt that it was like, especially in the beginnings of campus, that, I could feel like, I'm talking to you and this is where it's going to stop. But, in doing these interviews and talking with people, you find out that it was like things would just get used against you. And it was all control, especially if they didn't think that people were right together, people were doing the right thing. I mean, yeah, it's hard to live a life that you're not going to have sex with your girlfriend, you
Yeah,
know, and sharing that is a human natural thing to share,
yeah,
and it sucks that I mean, oh, it's just all control. The only thing that I can think of, it was all control.
yeah. It was, and what was hard, I really cared about this girl. Like
Yeah.
we went through some stuff together. Like we went through some really heavy, deep stuff together, and it it killed me, honestly. Like I was
Yeah.
miserable. Um, I was miserable for a straight year and a half, man. Like it was really, really hard to go through that and to think
Mhm.
this person who I spent so many intimate times with, as a look, as a teenager, right? I'm married
Sure.
now,
Mhm.
and I put it into context, but at that time, she was the closest thing to me. She was
Mhm.
my everything. She was my best friend. And for that relationship to get like ripped out, like it was kind of like the last, like there was almost like a sense of loss there. Like I didn't even know who I was. And so then it was, you got to go out on more dates and other people. And she, I'm getting told like she wants to go out on more dates. And so like, really give her space and separate yourself from her. And man, we would see each other at Devos. We would see each other at Wednesday services, at Sundays.
Yeah.
And I'm being told not to talk to her. And I'm like, man, I
Yeah.
lived with her and her mom like the last 2 months of high school and summer. Like I basically lived with her and her mom and brother. Like, so yeah, I went from like every day with this girl to then you're telling me I can't even talk to her. Um, it was it was so weird for me,
Yeah.
and so hard. At the same time, it was such a confusing time.
Well, what kept you there?
I felt like I didn't have anywhere else to go, to
Mm,
be honest
that
with you.
sucks.
And
Mhm.
I think that's the thing that like I feel like the church, when you say it's a cult, that to me is like what made it a cult for me is I felt like there was this psychological like manipulation that made you feel like if you left, you would have nothing. And for me, I didn't have a great relation. Like my mom and I weren't talking my senior year of high school. Um, I basically like she says she kicked me out. I say I left. Like
Mhm.
we were super like distance from each other. I didn't grow up with my dad. My dad and I never had a good relationship growing up. And so where do I go? Like, what do I have at that point? Right? Like, I don't have anywhere to go. I felt like I had nothing else. And so to me, it was like, well, what else do I do? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know where else to go. Right. And here I am, like, I'm part of this thing where it's like people are so loving and giving, but yet there's this other side of it where it's like you got to do this and this and this and this and that way, right? Like it's this
Mhm.
weird duality of like I didn't even know what the hell was going on. Like I don't even
Yeah.
know where to go, what to do. I don't even now. It's like I don't even know what to think. It's like this one hand. There's this richness and deepness where I'm like, there's these values and depth. I don't want to go to the party life and the drugs and the alcohol and the sleeping around because I saw that growing up and I know that that's not what I want. Like
Hmm.
I was never one to like sleep around in high school or anything like that anyways. Like I always had like one girl, committed relationship. Like I said, like I wanted a family, I wanted to raise a family. And so like to me, I was like, well, I gotta find it here. Like here's where I can find conviction and values. And so where else do I go? Right.
Yeah.
Like so it was just, yeah, it was confusing, man. I was so confused.
And the hardest part in those times is if you, I know it might have been for you or this, but for me, like if I were to think about that, there were always scriptures that would come up that they would use to make sense of that other side, right? And
Yes.
so you're like, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was just a manipulation of the scriptures to kind of keep you in line. And I mean it's God, I mean, I think about when I had my secret girlfriend in campus, and I finally came clean after about a month and a half of it. And I remember being sat down by someone and they were saying, well, you can choose her or you can choose God, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I
Yep.
mean, that's something that you're like, well, of course I'm going to choose God, you
Yeah.
know, but really it was, you know, I could choose her and I could choose God. But
Yep.
I didn't know that I see for me like I didn't know any other way. This was just how it was. So I was like, okay. And then for you, I can see how it would be like. I mean, this is just you didn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah. And you're
And it
right.
was,
Like they would
yeah.
use the scriptures and manipulate in that way to
Hmm.
make me feel like, okay, like, yeah, this is what I want, right? Because they knew where I came from and what I
Hmm.
wanted, right? Like I wanted different from what I saw growing up.
Yeah.
I so deeply desired something so different from what I had seen growing up, right? And so when you put those scriptures and you use those, it's like, yeah, of course I'm gonna stay, right? Like as
Yeah. Hmm.
painful as this is going to help me get the family and the wife and the relationship and the marriage that I want. And so
Yeah.
it was like I just got to tough this. Essentially, I got to tough this out because this is what it takes, right?
Hmm.
This is a part of it. And and sadly, I think it's tough because some of the same people that were feeding me those scriptures were doing more with their girlfriends at that time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, how are you preaching this stuff to me and basically doing everything except, excuse my language, penetration with your girlfriend? Like, sorry, like I have to use, like, I hate to be blunt, but like
No, it's
that's what
fine.
was going on from multiple people that were around me. And yet here I am, and mind you, all of them were kingdom kids. And
Yep.
so some of them were in ministry, and yet why weren't they being like I look back at it now, I'm like, why were they not being talked to? Like, why were they not being treated this way?
It,
Like,
it's this weird class system that we had that I wish I didn't have. Like, I hate saying that, but that's how I viewed it. Like, I viewed that like nine, knowing that there were people in the church that would have more, do more, and get to be more than I would ever get, you
mm-hmm,
know? And it sucks. And it was all a certain type of person. Usually they were in the ministry or they were friends with people in the ministry, you know, because they all sort of got to live near and around each other.
mm-hmm,
Um, and they got to say the things to us or to you, and then they got to do all the things, you
yeah.
know?
And I think that's what
Yeah.
was hard about that too, was
Mhm.
I felt like it came to God and came to scriptures and came to religion out of a pure heart and desire
Mhm.
like purely love God and purely love the scriptures and be inspired by them, be convicted by them. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying these other kids weren't, but I felt like it was just what they grew up with. They knew how
Yeah.
to play they knew how to, I hate saying this in this way, but
Play
it
the
was,
game.
yeah, it was like they knew how to play the game. And it was
Yeah.
like, there was a part of it where I always felt like the black sheep uh, in this group. Like I always felt like I was the black sheep because I was the emotional one. I was the one who was messed up. Like I was the one who had the screwed up background and childhood and upbringing and experiences and like I've all like this junk in my in my past. But in my heart of hearts, I'm like, man, like I love God so purely and I just want to help people. Like I just want to love and help other people, you
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
And why am I being like, I just always felt like, why am I being treated this way? Like I remember always feeling like that. Like, why am I being treated this way? Like, why do I feel like I'm always being discipled? I'm always getting in trouble. Like, and it was this, what was crazy was, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was just a perpetuation of my childhood. And so it's like, I understand now why I stayed
Hmm.
was because when you grow up and like when you're in that environment as a child and you're constantly feel like you're never good enough, it's almost like that becomes normal. And so you always think it's yourself. It's like when someone's abused, like you think it's your fault. And so
Hmm.
it's like, oh, well, I'm doing this. And so there was this like other side of me that was like, well, I'm doing this. So I guess I'm not being as good enough for God, right? Like, I guess I got to be better. And, but yet there's the logical side of me that was like, no, this is wrong. Like, why am
Yeah.
I being treated like this? Why am I being treated like the black sheep? Like, I'm loving purely, like, I'm really trying to do my best, you know?
Yeah. That's what, I mean, that's the thing that I was taught. I'm unworthy. I'm gonna have to work hard at this. And I'm a piece of shit. And I don't deserve to have anything. I should be lucky to be here. And if I mess up, I lose things, then it's my fault and I deserve to lose it. Like if that's that comes up for me in therapy constantly that I'm having to unlearn, and that's what I learned from a young age.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and I felt always felt like a black sheep. I always felt small. I always felt less than. Um, and they did a really good job of making us just believe it. And like that's just our world. And I could understand where you're coming from. Like, I mean, you just start to believe it. Yeah, it's hard to sit in it even right now when you think about it. But yeah, man. Um, how'd you get through it? So you got like a year and a half, you know, what clicked? What changed? What did it get better?
you know, it's hard to say because there's parts of me that feel, I was so, I wouldn't say intimidated when I reached out to you. I was like, there was just something in me that said, I need to reach out to you and I need to share my story as well. But then there was the other part of me that didn't want to share because I'm like, I should have left so many times and I didn't. And like, I can almost feel shame because I didn't leave earlier
Hmm.
uh, than when I did. But again, like there was this like, where else am I gonna go?
Yeah,
Like where else am I gonna go? Like I want to live a life that like is again, I wanted to live a life that was different. And I didn't know how to do that any other way. I didn't have
yeah.
any examples. And so it started for me, honestly, Roy, like 2 years into college. I I was living with a group of guys. Long story short, we have midweeks on Wednesday, Devos on Friday, Bible talks on Thursday, dates on Saturday, church on Sunday,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I'm having to pay for school out of pocket for myself, living in Boston, paying $750 a month for rent, which doesn't sound like a lot to people, but when you're living with four other guys and your rent is $750 and I'm having to pay for school out of pocket, which isn't
Jeez.
cheap as a state school in Boston, and pay for all my groceries and everything else, how am I going to do this? And so there was a month where I was late for rent. I was embarrassed because we would bring down our checks separately to the lease office, and I would bring like I couldn't bring my check down until the 15th. Like I knew I was going to be late and I didn't want to say anything to the guys because I felt embarrassed. And we ended up getting a letter sent to our mailbox, and one of my guys got it. One of my roommates got it. Ended up having a meeting with the campus minister, all four of us plus the campus minister. And basically what it came down to was they kicked me out of the apartment because they said I was being deceitful. And
Because he didn't, was it one time or multiple times?
yeah, it was one time, man. And
Sheesh, one time.
because I was being deceitful. And I remember at the time I was like, I don't think you understand. Like, I literally have nowhere to go. Like, I don't have anyone I can go to right now. Like, I'm not living back with my mom, and I've never lived with my dad. I'm not living with my dad. Like, I don't have a relationship with him. And I ended up different series of circumstances. I ended up meeting this guy at a singles event, and he basically like kind of took me in as a little brother, and stood up to the campus minister for me and basically told the campus minister to go to hell, and he doesn't care. He's going to live. He doesn't care if they told me I can't live with Christians right now, that I need
They
to.
told you can't live with
Oh
Christians.
yeah, they told me I couldn't live with any other disciples, because
I never knew this.
I really needed to figure this out.
Holy shit,
And
man.
yeah, and so this guy really like stood up for me, and then right after that the Henry Cleat letter came out, and so like
Uh,
church kind of went sour, and I went on kind of I wouldn't say a destructive path, but there was a few months, probably like 6 months, that I started hanging out with some people at my work, and first time, in probably 3 or 4 years that I drank, and I'm not one even still to this day that likes to drink a lot. But I was going out, hanging out with them, getting drunk, and I I did that for probably like 6, 7 months and felt like crap. Me and my girlfriend ended up getting back together um, during that time. That broke off horribly because there was just so much pain and hurt that was
of
there from
course.
breakup
Yeah.
and unravelings that we didn't even know were in there. And she lost all trust in me because of all that stuff, and felt like I didn't stick up for her and stand up for our relationship. And so it was like, then I'm back in this place of feeling at rock bottom and feeling like I have nowhere to go and nothing to do. Um, and so it was like, then I went sort of, I don't want to say like crying back to the church, but like kind of crawling back to the church, because I was like, again, it's like, what else do I do? Like, I
Yeah.
don't
Hmm.
live this party life. What's my other option here? You know?
Hmm.
Uh, so that was the first time I left. Um, and then series of different events, I ended up moving down to Georgia, where I ended up dating a girl that was in the church, down in Georgia, and ended up getting, I guess you would say, more serious, about church,
Yeah.
again with the church down there, the ICOC down in Georgia. Um, yeah. So that was the first time I left.
For the first time.
First time. Why
I
I
mean,
didn't
it's
stay? I mean,
do what?
I don't know why I didn't stay away that time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think about when, I want to go back to you were talking about why did I stay and the shame in that. It's hard to shake it, it's hard to shake the shame of being in something like that, but living in the land of should in
Yeah.
something like that is destructive for your mind and for your heart. Um, yeah, man. So you go to Georgia and then you're getting serious about it. It seems like it got better, or did
I
it?
wouldn't necessarily say it got better. I just, again, it was the only example for me. The church was the only example, the ICOC was the only example for me of people that I felt like were living somewhat morally strong.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that's something that is so important to me, right?
Hmm.
Like it's still so important in my life now to live with a set of values and to live by a set of values. Like I said, man, like when I say I made a devotion to myself when I was 16 years old, like that was very real for me. That was very deep. Like I wanted to be the change maker. I wanted to be the one who broke the cycles, who broke the chains in my family of these things being passed on generationally. And like that's what kept me there. Like that's what kept me around is because I didn't know of any other group, place, like body of people that were living in that way.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was like it was hard for me to see anything else. As
Hmm.
much as I didn't like so many, and so at this point, I saw all the hypocrisy. Like the hypocrisy was very clear to me now at this point when I'm in Georgia, right? Like with all the stuff I went through in Boston and being in Georgia, like I could see right through all that stuff.
Yeah.
Even some of the stuff that I witnessed and saw when I first moved to Georgia and the first ministry that I was a part of, I was like, oh, I see this hypocrisy like clear as day, right? And so it wasn't like I was oblivious to it, but I think this time in Georgia, I was a lot stronger within myself that I wasn't willing to take the BS anymore. Um, and that I was there because, again, like it was the only place for me, the only community for me that had a level of moral standards.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
man. And that desire is strong. It'll get you to take a lot of crap.
yeah,
Hmm.
it did. And and it's funny because the first church we went to, what made me leave this church in Georgia, the first church that I went to down in Georgia,
Hmm.
um, after a year being there, me and the girl ended up breaking up. I ended up, I was single again in this church down in Georgia, trying to find my way down here. Um, I ended up starting to like talk to this other girl. We were just like getting to know each other, becoming friends. She was in college, so I was 2 years older than her at that time. And we had stayed out one night just talking, like literally just talking, connected on a deep level. And we were out until like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning one night. The next morning at church, I get the guy who's leading the church at the time. He comes up to me after service and he comes over and he shakes my hand and he's like, hey, gives me the old ICOC greeting. And he keeps my hand, like he keeps shaking my hand in his hand. And he said, I heard you were out last night, with this so-and-so girl. And I said, yeah. I said, yeah, we went out, last night. We hung out. And he's like, yeah, I heard you out really late with her. And I was like, yeah, I mean, we were. And he's like, she's a little younger than you, and we're really raising her up to want to be, one of the campus leaders. And I think maybe you'd be better suited on talking to some girls that maybe are your age. And I said, oh,
Age.
really? I said, yeah, that's number one. Why are you still holding my hand? And why are you gripping it really tightly right now? Because
Yeah.
like I said, at this point, I'm like, I'm enough with the bullshit. Like I'm over
Yeah.
this stuff. Dude's still holding my hand, Roy, like
You
in
can't like,
gripping it like so tight. And I looked
yeah.
at him in the eye and I said, if you do not let go of, and this point, like it's getting heated. And I said, if you do not let go of my hand in 2 seconds, I'm going to embarrass you in front of this entire congregation, in front of this church. And I don't care what happens next. And I said, so you better let go of my hand right now. And he put it down. And I looked
Good
at
for
him and
you.
said, if you ever do that again, I do not care. I will knock you out right here. I said, don't ever threaten me like that again. And I walked out and I never walked back into that church again. And again, like that was a moment that I could have left.
Yeah. Where were you gonna go?
Coincidentally, a guy that I knew in Boston that I really liked and really respected, he had moved down here within that 2 years that I had been down in Georgia and was leading another church, and it was different. It wasn't like the
Yeah.
old ICOC, it was a little bit looser. And so I was like, well, let me go over there. Right. Um, so again, it's like my second time like leaving, but not being able to really leave. Right.
Yeah. Hmm. It's like you're continually trying to make it work.
I'm trying. This is like I
Yeah.
want to, like in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I want this to work.
And
Like
shouldn't that be enough?
it should.
Like, shouldn't it, like it should be enough for you to like, I'm trying. Yeah, we get it. Okay. We're here for you. But instead it's like, you know, let's shame you about things. People are going to find out, and then it's going to be, and it's crazy because the things, no one would ever come to you directly. I mean, the leaders came to you directly, is what I'm saying. But usually for anything, no one would just approach you and just say, "Hey, that was weird," you
Yeah.
know? And then in reality, though, if the two people are there and nothing's going on that's wrong, and the girl that you're with is not uncomfortable, she's fine with it, then why does there need to be anything else talked about?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. And I think there too, like around that time, like I know, to backtrack a little bit, part of the reason why at different points, and I don't want to discredit this, and I want to give, credit to this piece. The other part that was hard for me to leave is because I did meet some of my best friends. Like still to this day, five of my four of my best friends were guys that I met within the church. And two of them were around that first like 4 or 5 year period. And so there was part of it, there was some genuine dudes that I was really close to, like that I knew that if I left, like those, I don't know if those relationships would have lasted. And so that was like that was another part that was like holding me there as well, was because I
Yeah.
felt like, again, like these were guys we were talking about before this, we started recording, about just male relationships are hard in general. Like they're
Yeah.
just hard for guys to connect on a deep level. And I had connected with a couple of guys in a deep level that I had never, in all the years that I played sports, had ever connected with. And so that was another string that was like holding me there, were these relationships with these guys.
Mhm.
And I felt like if I had fully left, there was almost like I'd be letting them down.
Mhm.
Um, and that was a difficult thing for me to feel like, number one, I'm letting them down. And I think because of a lot of my male father trauma,
Uh-huh.
there was some of that in there as well, of like I never had I never had a strong male in my life. And so having male relationships was like, oh man, if I leave this, then it's like I'm left with no male relationships again, right? Like it's like I'm an orphaned boy again. And that's exactly how I felt all growing up, like not having a male figure in my life, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of psychological jacked up things that were tough for me to leave.
Those relationships, though, I mean, for every dozen people that were in the church that hurt me or said something or held me down, it was always somebody that came around that saw me for me.
Yeah.
And which made it, it wasn't like I looked at it as like, okay, I'll stay. It was just more of like, I'm seen. And so it like got me to kind of like, it wasn't necessarily that it got me to stay. It just kept me sort of like, I don't know. There's something about being seen and heard that helps you see get through all of that, the mess that you're going through, you
Yeah.
know.
It's a great way
Even
to
when
say
it
it.
even when it was with even when I was a kid, for every messed up teen worker, there was always one guy that I could rely on. And it's what sucked about that though is they never stayed the longest. They
Yes.
was because they saw through everything and then they leave.
Yep.
Um, but I mean that's what kept me what got me to this place of stability are these male relationships throughout my life in this church. It's the reason why I was a teen worker, it's the reason why I was a teacher. You know, it's a powerful thing to have that
Hmm.
as a guy, right?
Yep.
That have someone that's not your dad, or for you to have someone that's a father figure for you or a stable male figure for you. And like I could sort of relate to you on staying around because it's like, I don't know, like I felt like when shit hit the fan, I could lean on somebody,
Hmm.
you know? Um,
Yep. Yep.
so you leave, it's so crazy because we're gonna jump in. So you have this instance, and then all of a sudden you go into the ministry. You become a teen, like the youth leader. It like
Yeah.
doesn't make sense, man. Like
Doesn't.
listening to the story, and I've knowing you as long as I have, didn't know some of these things,
Hmm.
but it's still like, all right, so this sucks, but I'm still gonna go into the ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's like it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense for me.
Mhm.
Um, even still to this day, because I have such a desire and a heart to help other men
Uh-huh.
and other young men as well.
Yeah.
I think growing up without a dad in my life, and now my father and I have a great relationship now. Like we've really worked through a lot over the last 15 years. I've been really able to heal a lot of wounds through therapy and it's been awesome. But that desire to help give back in that way it's always been there for me. I used to say, when people ask like what I wanted to go to college for and stuff like that, it was people that knew me growing up playing sports either thought it was sports because I was, like I said, a talented athlete, or cooking because I loved cooking. And I would always say, I don't know what I want to do. I just know I want to help people.
Hmm.
I just want to help people not feel like they're not. I just want to help people because I never felt good enough. And I want to make sure that nobody else feels this way because the way that feels sucks. And so I don't know what it is, but I want to do that every day. And when I found the church and saw ministers, I was like, wow, they get to do this all they're doing all day is just helping people. Like, that's it. That's literally their job. Like, that's it for me. I want to be a minister. I want to be a pastor. Like, that's incredible. I get to inspire people and just sit with people and help people. Like, that's amazing. And so, I think that's where that desire came from for ministry. And I have a heart for teenagers. Like, I do. I have a heart for teenage guys, young guys that I, need role models and need someone to look up to. I needed that and wanted that so badly when I was younger, that I was said, like, when I get older, like, I want to be that. I want to be that for somebody else. And so
Mhm.
I think that's where that desire came for being in ministry. And I think at that time, it was, I wanted to be the change maker.
Yeah.
Like, there was a piece of me that felt like, well, I see all the junk that's bad. I see all the hypocrisy. Like, I see all the junk that's wrong with this. Let me be a part of the solution here. Like, let me be a part of the change here. If I'm going to stay,
Mhm.
let me be a part of helping to change this and change all the things that I saw that made me feel like crap, or made me feel less than, or made other people I
Mhm.
watched feel less than and treated badly and manipulated and made to feel like we were talking about, made to feel shameful. It's like,
Mhm.
let me do this differently. If I can do that, like, let me do this.
Yeah.
You know.
That's
So
cool. I
that's
mean,
what.
yeah, that's why, I mean, I hated school and then I became a teacher.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense, when you think about it, but it was along the same line. So what was it like being a youth leader, youth minister?
Man, there was parts of it that were so incredible.
Hmm.
There was parts of it that I absolutely loved and felt like it was where I belonged and like who I was meant to be, and I was truly living my purpose. Where I felt so much in the flow of and aligned with what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
Uh-huh.
So many moments like that when I would work with kids, and they would open up to me about just things that are going on in their life, and being able to love them and be that shoulder for them, be that person that they could talk to and that they could rely on. Like, those aspects of ministry I absolutely loved. um, some of the other sort of business parts of ministry I hated. uh,
Hmm.
and I butted heads so badly at different times with the elders and uh, the minister that was leading our church. And look, at the time I was still young. I was in my mid 20s. So, there's a lot of immaturity still there that, for me. So I get it. Um, but there were certain things that it was hard. It was hard
Hmm.
to be in that environment because, the shame, the feeling like I had to be perfect all the time came up. And here I am teaching these kids about grace and love. And that's what I always focused on. I mean, you were a part of that ministry that I was leading.
Hmm.
I feel like all I ever focused on and tried to preach was about love and grace and relationship. Um, I never wanted to push anything on these kids to like make them feel any sense of shame or duty or obligation in being something that was
Yeah.
to ask them. And sometimes I got that pressure to sort of do that. I can tell you there was times where I shared a certain Friday devotional, and I got very honest with the kids about some of my struggles as a teenager. Some of the guys, got very open with them, so it would hopefully open the door for them to feel like they could be honest and like, hey, like, it's okay. Like, I wish I had someone to talk to about this stuff, and I didn't. And I remember one of the elders pulling me aside and be like, well, you really shouldn't, be, talking like so openly with these guys. And I was like, so if I'm not talking to them about this stuff, if their parents aren't talking to them about this stuff, so you want them to be talking about these real world things with their friends? That doesn't make sense. Like, why are we here?
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a safe place that these kids can like, I thought that that's what this was. And that's where the stuff started coming up for me again, was like, I'm butting heads again. Like, this stuff is coming up again. I feel like I'm back in college, like
Yeah.
same stuff. Like,
It
and
had to
it,
have been it had to have been hard being like the third church, and also with the church that you were at and that we were at, you know, a lot of people like us went to that church
mm-hmm,
because of the difference that it was. I remember the the way people talked about that church, because I didn't go there as quick as you did, because I was still a part of another church working with the teens there. And
mm-hmm,
the way that they would talk about that church was always in jest
yeah,
and stuff. And they would make fun of it or things like that. And it was like, oh, you're going there. Hmm. And I
mm-hmm,
always got upset with that because my parents were there. And I was just like, screw you guys. Um, anyway, but to see that there, to hit it again has got to be hard.
yeah, it was. It
Mm.
was very hard.
Yeah.
Um, it was very hard, and,
Hmm.
and but I think because it wasn't, like you said, it was a lot less than any other of the ICOC churches that I had been a part of. It was more tolerable.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
it was much more tolerable for me. And so,
Uh-huh.
because there was more, I would say, because there was more pockets of people that were, let's say, looser on
Hmm.
the rules um, of the traditional ICOC, it made it a lot easier to stay. It made it a lot easier to overlook some of the people who were still sort of hung up on some of the rules of the ICOC,
Hmm.
right? Um, so
Yeah. The conversations that I had at that church were different than I had at any other church. The books that would get circulated, the talks, it just, it felt different for a
mhm,
while. It was different for me because I just technically was. I mean, I helped in the ministry, but I wasn't like, you know, paid to be there.
yeah,
Um, there was a short time that I was. It was weird.
yes, 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 it was.
That was a weird time. So you so you stayed. I know that and you're hitting it again. So what was it that, I mean, again, you're still there trying to make it work. Did you just reach a point that you were like, enough is enough? I can't do it anymore?
In the ministry.
Yeah, or the ministry and then the church.
Um,
Well, hold on. Little technical difficulty there. All right, so you're in the ministry. How did it seems like you're starting to butt heads. So what happened? Did you leave? What happened?
yeah, so I ended up getting fired. Um,
Yeah.
I, long story short, I made probably a an immature decision, I guess.
Hmm.
We were out for my birthday one night. It was me, a couple guys. There was a girl that was there that was, I don't know if she wasn't dating one of the guys at the time. I thought she was. She
She wasn't. I
Okay.
was there too. You can say that. I was there.
I didn't want to say names.
It's fine. I was there.
So we were all out for my birthday. Vortex, if you've ever been to the Vortex in Atlanta, Georgia, cool place. We all got burgers, hung out. We all got a drink, and the bartender, the waiter came over, found out it was my birthday, and brought shots for everybody at the table. One of the kids that was there, one of the girls that was there, she was 19. They asked her if she wanted a drink. She took it. Someone there at the birthday, I found out later, called one of the girls who I was leading the ministry with and told her that she felt uncomfortable because I let this girl have a drink at my party and she was underage, which I was like, I'm not her dad. I'm not like, I didn't let her do anything. She made a decision for herself. There was 7 other people there that could have told her not to. Anyways, I digress. They ended up telling our minister. I got brought in by the elders like 2 days after my birthday for a meeting. They said, essentially what ended up coming out was I was being deceitful. I wasn't being a good enough example because I let this girl drink at my birthday and have a shot. And so because I was not able to be honest and truthful and that I was lying, which I wasn't really, like, there was nothing in me that was trying to lie, or that was lying, trying to be deceitful with anybody. There were 7 other people at this birthday dinner, but ended up getting fired. So yeah, that's how I got out of ministry the first time.
And then they let me run the
And
teens for a little bit. And I was at the party.
and another guy who was at the party,
Yep.
they let Phil in as well for you.
That was a wild time for me. It was
That
a wild
was,
time for everyone.
yeah, yeah. I always
My
thought that
stint,
was ironic that
yeah,
2 people that were at the birthday dinner ended up coming in and helping out the teens after that.
it
Which
was one of those things, man, because your title had youth minister attached to it. That's what it was. I mean, if I was in a situation and if with a school or something and I was the teacher,
yep,
I was gonna go down. That
yep,
would be how it was. But
yep,
yeah, I was having a real good time at that party, and it was just really funny. I remember being in that situation and getting called in and was to that weird meeting,
yeah,
and they're like, "We're gonna need you to lead." And I didn't lead as long as I thought I was, and it started because I disagreed with who they chose. I think it was because I disagreed with who they chose after that.
yeah.
Because I didn't really. That's a whole nother thing.
As a whole
But
nother.
anyway.
Yeah,
But like, so you're fired, and then what was that like? Were you feeling like here we go again?
absolutely. I felt like it
Yeah.
was Groundhog's Day all over again. Of like when I got, it
Mhm.
was like, dude, it was like flashbacks of like me leaving my house in high school, me getting kicked out of my apartment in Boston,
Mhm.
me getting broken up with my campus ministers, telling my girlfriend that I didn't want to be with her. Like it was like flashbacks of like all these situations again. And it
Yeah.
was like, gosh, like here we go again. Like here we go again. Like what am I going to do? Like when am I, and then you start questioning like when am I going to learn? Like is this just God testing me? Am I not, I start asking myself those questions like all over again. Like at that point, it got to like where I started questioning myself a lot more
Mhm.
than like getting mad at anybody at the church. Like those other times it was like, I was just mad at the church. I was mad at like what, like people, and there was some of that in there, but this time it was more of like, I started really beating myself up.
Mhm.
Like, I started really feeling bad about myself, um, really bad about myself. And I remember about 2 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, I was, I didn't realize at the time, but I was depressed. I was really, really depressed. And I remember we went out, um, there was a few of us that went up and we went kayaking on the Broad River. And I went up with a couple of friends, a couple of people who were a part of the church at that time, and then a few people who were not. And like I said, man, even still to this day, I'm not a big drinker. I don't like, I'm not a big alcohol guy. Like it just doesn't sit well in my system. I always feel like crap after I drink like more than like 2 drinks. And that day, man, like I probably drank more than I have in my life and on that river. And I remember we came to the end of the river and got off, and there was a girl who was a part of the church there. And she like confronted me and she was like, what are you doing? Like, I can't believe you're doing this. And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't even fucking care. I am so drunk right now and I don't give a fuck what's going on, because I just felt like it was almost like I just given up on myself. Like I just felt like I can't do anything right. Like
Yeah.
I was just in a shame cycle. Like now I realize now I was just in a shame cycle where I just felt horrible about myself. I really did. I felt like a failure. I felt like yeah, I just felt like I couldn't do anything right in my life. Um, and I felt like I had no direction. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I didn't know where to go. Yeah, I felt all of it, man. I felt hopeless. I felt embarrassed. Uh, because I cared. Like I cared so deeply. I think you would vouch for this, and that I cared so deeply for the kids that I worked with.
Hmm.
The high school kids that I coached outside of church and the kids that I worked with in the church, man, like they're in my heart. Like I
Yeah.
cared so deeply for them. Um, and it just hurt. It just hurt because I felt like I was a failure. Um, it was like that story that I always grew up with, was that I'm not enough. It was it was just like a confirmation, like a stamp, like this is etched in stone, like you're not enough. And that's yeah, it was a dark few months for me, man.
So what got you through it?
I don't know. I think honestly, to be honest with you, laughter.
Yeah.
Living with you and Todd, I have never said this to you. Living with you and Todd during
Yeah.
that time is the only reason I didn't go and spiral to a deeper place.
Mm.
Like and I apologize, I never said that to you before, but honestly, living with you and Todd during that time, I laughed harder during that time than I had any other time in my life.
Yeah.
And I think having you guys lighten that time in my life for me was it I feel like it saved me a lot. Like that, being able to come home to you guys in that way and like have that, and still having coaching,
Yeah.
training, doing my personal training and coaching lacrosse. If it wasn't for those two things, that like, yeah, I don't know that I don't know how I would have gotten through that time.
Mm.
But being able to, come home from coaching and like have you guys to laugh with and still accept me
Yeah, we
was,
did a lot of stupid stuff.
we did, we did.
Yeah. Hmm.
But it was honestly like that's what pulled me through that time.
Yeah. Well, it's like that thing, like if you're not laughing, you're crying, during those hard times. I think I was doing a lot more laughing because I I knew I would be breaking down too, because those were rough years the whole time. But what's interesting is you decide to become the youth minister again. Which
I
you
did.
forgot about. And
Did forget about. I did. And when you reminded me there, it's like again, like you asked the question, why, how could you do it? Like how could you
yeah.
become a minister again? I go back to the original. Working with kids, man, is all I wanted. Like, that's all I saw myself doing at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a psychology degree. Personal training and coaching, I was making decent money, but I wanted to I wanted to help kids on a deeper level. I felt like I wanted to help kids on a deeper level. And so that
Hmm.
was, to me, that was my only other option. And when the opportunity came about again, I was like, man, this is what I want to, this is what I feel like I'm meant to do with my life, you
Hmm.
know, is do that. And so, I took the opportunity to do it again. Because I cared. And I still do.
Yeah.
I care. Um,
And how long did you do that for?
Man, you tell me. I can't remember. I think it
I
was,
don't remember because I wasn't a part of the church. I had left.
yeah, you had left, but yeah, it didn't last. I will say it didn't last long. Um, I do know that it didn't last long. Um, it might have honestly been, I think it was less than a year. Um, that I ended up staying there.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Long story short, I ended up getting offered an opportunity to go into restaurants. One of
Hmm.
my mentors, he was an assistant coach, and through some of the dads of some of the kids that I had coached who really took a liking to me, he like courted me essentially for 6 months, and wanted to recruit me to sort of essentially be his like protege in the restaurant world. He was the CEO and president of a very large, well-known restaurant group, national brand, and I was like, "It's no way, dude!" Like I said no for 6 months, um, and it came down to a dinner we had, and I asked him one question. I said, "Why do you?" I don't understand it. I have no college degree. I've been a personal trainer and coach and minister for the last 10 years. I haven't worked in restaurants since I was in college. Like what do you like why would you like I don't have any business knowledge at this point. Like why would you do this? Like why would you want to recruit me? And he said, "You have leadership abilities that I can't teach. And I can teach you the business side, but I can't teach these leadership qualities."
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that and why that was so impactful, because it was the first time a male had ever spoken something to me that I felt I'm good enough.
Mm.
It was like a validation of like, oh, I have something, like I have something to give. Like I have something worthy. Like I have something worthy to give this world. Like, and not that ministry was not it. Like that wasn't something worthy. It definitely was. But when he spoke that to me, it was different than anyone. Like, here's a guy who has experienced me for a year and, has just watched me, and like, he's not getting anything out of this. Like, like there's nothing here for him to get. Like,
Yeah.
and,
So
and
weird
I
it
felt
wasn't from the
like,
church, you
and he
know?
wasn't from the church. Exactly. And I felt like there was something there that I could trust. Like there was something there that I felt like was really genuine. And
Hmm.
I think because of the things that had happened in the ministry prior, when I went back into ministry, there was always in the back of my head, uh, like I better have a plan B, because I know like there was a
Oh,
level
wow.
of trust
Hmm.
that was broken, that I felt like I can't trust this as being secure and solid for the rest of my life. Like I can't trust this because I'm back in ministry and I'm back in a job where people fired me for something that I don't necessarily feel like I agreed with. And so when this came about, it was kind of like, this is my opportunity to leave and get
Hmm.
out. And and I did. And so I did. Um,
And so
and I
you leave and you move, right?
Yes, So we left. I ended up working for that company for 5 years. Um, I got promoted 5 times in 5 years. After 3 years, I had spent 3 years on the road, traveling a ton all over the country. And when I would come home on the weekends, we would go to church. And I remember from day one, I would come home and my wife and I would go to church, and people would come up to me like, oh, we miss you. Like, we don't see you often anymore. And, how are things going? And I remember just feeling like, how the fuck do you miss me, but not say anything or not reach out to me during the week? Like,
Yeah.
how do you not and so I just started feeling like this is so disingenuous. Like, this is fake. Like, that's when it clicked for me, when I was able to pull myself out and I wasn't part of the tribe all the time,
Yeah.
that I realized oh, if you're not a part of this, you're not really cared about fully. And
Wow.
so slowly started feeling more and more as the year went on, as the 2 years went on, I just felt like I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired of doing this. And by year 2, we had our first child, and it became more evident. I'm like, man, I'm going through the hardest time in my life, traveling all the time, trying to make a career in life for my family. My wife's home, my son's home. This is tough. I'm traveling. I leave Monday mornings at 5 a.m. to catch the first flight out, and I'm not home until Friday night. I'm working 16-hour days on the road, opening up restaurants.
Yeah.
And then on Sundays, we're expected to go to church with a 1-year-old. And I remember telling my wife at the time, I can't do this anymore. This is exhausting. And it just became more and more of that, where I was just I just felt like it wasn't real. It just was not fake.
Hmm.
It all finally kind of came to a head for me, where I was all this time over these last 15 years that I kept leaving, coming back, feeling like that thread of hope that was still there, that I was holding on to. During that time when I was traveling, that just completely broke apart. And I was just I'm not doing this anymore. And I think because I had my family unit now, I didn't feel afraid to step away anymore,
Hmm.
because I had my unit now. I had my people. I had my forever. And so I felt like there's no point to this to me anymore. There's no point to this. And
Yeah.
and in getting to travel the country, you get to meet so many people.
Hmm.
And that's what opened up my eyes to see wow, there are phenomenal people in this world. Phenomenal people that go to different Christian churches, that have very strong, deep convictions, that don't go to a church, right? This stuff was kind of mind blowing to me. I was oh, we're not the only church that's really devoted to their values and principles.
Yeah.
And so that sort of started really unraveling it for me for the final time. And then when we moved to Rochester, as you said, after it was in my 3rd year with this company, we moved to Rochester, New York, and I came home one day and I told my wife, I was I'm done. I don't want to go to church. I'm done with the Christianity stuff. I need to take a step away from this.
Hmm.
I need to I need to do something else. I need to figure this out. And I can't do this under the guise of calling myself a Christian, going to church, because we started to go to another church up there, a different church. And I was just I'm just done with it. I'm done with the preaching. I'm done with the teaching. I'm done with someone else telling me what to believe, how to believe, what to think, what to say, how to say it, how to think it. And I just said, it's time. It's time for me to walk away.
And
So,
it sucks because that's kind of the MO for Christianity is it's someone telling you how to do it
mhm.
instead of like an inclusive nature to this whole thing. You
Yeah,
know, this is how you're supposed to think about this instead of like a conversation.
yeah. Which is so sad to me because it's not what I ever, it's not, I always, there was a point that I always, there's so many times where I felt that, trying not to
Hmm.
use the word always, but there was so many points where I felt that I'm like, I read the scriptures and this is not what I'm seeing in the scriptures. Like,
Yeah.
this is
Hmm.
not who Jesus was. This is not how he, this is not who he was. He was not this,
Yeah.
he preached against this. Like
Hmm.
the
He was
way
trying to, but I'm sorry.
the way that the ICOC functioned was what I saw him preach against the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's like the religious teachers of that day was like, that's how the ICOC functioned. And I was like, man, there were so many times I felt like if Jesus was here, he would obliterate this ICOC church. Like he would
Hmm.
literally shame them with scripture to help them to see, like, like you guys are literally living in opposite of what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Like, and and that's where I saw it so heavily when I left. I saw it so much more clear. Um, I saw it so much
Hmm.
more clear. And it was so weird because it's like I almost had more of a desire to read in a weird way. I almost had more of a desire to read my Bible than I did because I was looking at it with so much more fresh eyes. And I put it down for a while. I will say I didn't pick up my Bible for probably a good year, 2 years. Um,
I was 6, maybe 7.
really, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what Jesus was teaching and he was trying to free us from an empire. These people were wanting to do what was right, but there was all of these things in the way for them to have this relationship. And it was all about the rules and the people in charge and the system. And then we turned Jesus into an empire.
Hmm.
We turned him into an establishment. We turned him into his teachings got turned into a set of rules and regulations, and then a bunch of people tell us how we're supposed to see it
Yep.
instead of, and he would always ask. It just felt like I don't know, I always get this feeling of like if I was with him, it would be like, how do you see this? Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know? Because you think about like I think about that message when he's talking about forgiveness. And he's like, how many times should I forgive someone? It's just kind of like, I mean, what's 7 times 7? It's like he's trying to get to the heart of it. He's like, no, what do you think? I mean, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I love
yeah,
what you said there that you like it's he would ask how and what,
yeah. Hmm.
right? I heard a quote the other day. I was just looking at my notes. I heard a quote on a podcast the other day. And they said, all what and how say bye to why. All what and how say
Yeah,
bye
say
to
bye to
why.
what?
And
Yeah.
what this person was talking about, she's a communications and body language expert, and she was talking about this is the way we need to communicate with each other. Drop why, like say
Hmm.
goodbye to the question why, and ask people how and what. Because when you
Hmm.
ask people how and what, it it's not a like aggressiveness. Like when you ask someone why they did something, it immediately puts them in the defensive. But when you ask them like, "Oh, how did you see this?" or "What did you think about this?" It's
Yeah.
an
Hmm.
open question. It helps people open, and it just reminded me of that when you said that. I was like, "Yeah, that's
Hmm.
exactly." I could imagine that's exactly how he was. Was he would ask those kind of questions? How do you see this? Well, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know?
Hmm. Did you have a moment when you looked at the Bible again and you were just like, I'm looking at the Bible again, like a realization?
I did, and there's still sometimes I still feel that.
Yeah, I keep looking over at my bookshelf. It's like to the right of me, and I'm seeing all these books, and it's just hilarious that I'm here. I think about that. I remember when I finally was like opening the Bible again, I was listening to, I think, a Rob Bell podcast,
Yeah.
and it was something he was saying at the time, and I was reading, and then I like looked at the Bible on my phone, and I was like, what am I doing? This
Yeah.
is weird. And then I'm getting something out of it again. It's you know, like you, I put it, I was like nothing about it, you know. I was like Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass. I
Yep.
was going to
Yep.
all these other like things, the Bible and God isn't real or anything, stuff like that.
Yeah. I was the
So,
same way, man. I threw away. I don't
mhm,
have any. I had a stack. I had a stack of Christian books.
mhm.
I threw them all away. I threw them all in the trash. I don't have a single Christian book that I had um, other than Rob Bell's books.
Yeah.
I literally, Rob Bell is the only quote unquote Christian books that I still have on my shelf. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but I threw every single one of my Christian books away. And, I'm glad you brought him up. Rob Bell's he's probably the only reason why right now that I have still found value in the Bible. Um,
Mm.
Listening to him over the last 5 years as he's journeyed through his journey has given me so much strength and so much hope.
Mhm.
I feel like so much of his process has been my process these last 5 years. I should say last 7 years. Sorry. Can't believe it's been that long. But these last 7 years in particular, that he's been sort of the only person that's remotely religious I wouldn't even use the word religious, but that comes from that Christian world that I listen to and have listened to.
Yeah, he was the door to the outside for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of like he showed me there was a door that I could go through. And then like it's because with him, like with the books and what that leads me to, because the books, what I loved about kind of his process is it leads you to something. It doesn't lead you necessarily to him.
Yeah.
It's like safe to sit with questions. It's safe to sit with the paradoxes. It's safe to sit with these things. And he also like kind of like digs deeper like that. I don't know if you've read What is the Bible by
Yep.
him. Yeah,
Yep.
where you know, the way he was talking about how to read, you know, the use of the Bible and stuff, and just his process through that helped. So yeah, he was the door, and I went through it, and then I found, you know, Richard Rohr. He's helped me free a lot of stuff. And then it's just I don't know, it's weird, you know. I've landed in this place where I'm still like searching, you know. I think I have more what I don't want to do rather than what I want to do when it comes to God. I don't know if you're the same way.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I am right. Like
Mhm.
there's parts of me that it's interesting. I went really deep into the personal development space
Mhm.
the last 7 years, like very deep into the personal development space. Reading like every personal development book in psychology, and I've went really deep into that, and it's hard because I would read certain things, and I'm like, I know a scripture that completely explains this.
Mhm.
Oh man, I know that scripture totally talks about this. That scripture totally talks about that. And so it was like, after so many years of reading these personal development books and listening to these podcasts and listening to these books and going to these seminars and listening to these, guys online, I'm like, man, so much of this is rooted in scripture. They just don't
Hmm.
know it, right? I know it from like having a history with it. Um, and that's so it's this weird, like, there's so much wisdom there,
Hmm.
but I still won't like, still to this day, I don't want to step foot in a church. Like we've gotten asked by a couple of friends up here that, like, if we'd want to go to church with them, and I
Hmm.
still can't. Like I still have no desire to. Like I just don't. I have no desire. Like,
It's hard.
yeah, I still can't bring myself to it. And yeah, even talking about like there's certain ways that, yeah, I have a very close relationship with my uncle, who's he's a Christian, and has been, part of his church that he goes to for a very long time, and was an elder for a while in his church, and nothing like the ICOC, but we have very deep conversations, about life,
Hmm.
and he knows, like, there's times where he'll talk about Jesus in a way that, um, he talks about Jesus in a way, not that he's the only way,
Hmm.
but has overtones of that, and it's still
Yeah.
hard for
Hmm.
me to hear. Um, it's hard for me to hear without the ICOC stuff attached to it. Um,
Hmm.
and I struggle with that at times, because I'm like, there's so much, there is so much wisdom in it. There's so much wisdom in what Jesus preached and in what Jesus taught and what he spoke. And that's the thing. Like, I still find myself, I quote scriptures all the time. I just naturally quote scriptures because the wisdom in it.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so there's this, I don't know, man. Sometimes I'm like, dude, it's just this weird paradox of like,
What is it like approaching and talking about Jesus feels like, or even reading the Bible, even doing anything Christianity, like you have to do it a certain way? Is that kind of what comes in? Like if
it
you,
is,
hmm.
yeah, like
Hmm.
I feel like I can't fully talk about Jesus, because then I feel like people are going to assume that I'm all in,
Hmm.
and I know that I'm not all in, and I just don't want to deal with the headache of the conversations and the judgment.
Yeah. Hmm.
Does that make
I
sense?
hide. Yeah, I,
Right. And so it's like there's a part
oh,
of like it that, like, I
I
can't get away
cover.
from the wisdom of it,
Yeah.
but I don't want to claim to believe in all the wisdom of it and talk about it publicly,
Yeah.
because I don't want to be labeled as a Christian, because
Mhm.
Christian to me comes from the ICOC version of where you had to be perfect. And if you were not perfect, then you weren't fully a Christian. You weren't sold out. Like, you were not,
Yeah. Mhm.
right. And so, and so there's just, yeah, there's just like that, still that judgment in the back of my head where I'm like,
I was working on, I was writing and just preparing some stuff for some other episodes I'm working on, and I had my Bible and I was trying to hide it. I was in a coffee shop and I was trying to hide it. If I have a book, even if it says Rob Bell or anything, I try to hide it because I don't want to be um associated with that.
mm-hmm,
Um, it's hard to put that away. It was hard for me to feel like I could read the Bible, talk about Jesus, pray, like dig into any kind of book, and to feel like I had to do it a certain way. Like I think the one thing that I'm at now is I'm kind of free to be. I think
mm-hmm.
that's probably the place that like I'm finally like, yeah, I mean, I can read the Bible and that's okay. I don't, there's no one going to be sitting behind us
Yeah.
telling us that we're not reading it the right way, or we didn't just get it. We didn't
Yeah.
get it the right way, you know.
Yeah.
Um, that's been, but it was hard. I mean, it's still hard too, because like we've tried to go to churches, and like I can't, I can't do it. It's even harder too, because for research purposes, I've been touring churches here in
Yeah.
Virginia Beach,
Yeah.
and it's like I'm just, oh man, I don't know, I can't do this. I can't go in because you just start to see everything, see how
Yeah.
they do stuff. You know,
Yeah.
and my history is with working with the coffee industry in the contemporary Christian world. Like
Hmm.
I see all the other stuff too. So I've got like, you know, heaps of stuff that I got thrown onto my heart. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's hard to unsee what you've already seen, right?
Yeah.
Um, it is. It's really hard to unsee what you've seen. And
Mhm.
you know,
Well,
like, but
it
like
is.
there's parts of it though that it's yeah, you can't get away from. I don't know. I just feel like I was gonna say like you can't get away from though. Like I feel like I still can't get away from the wisdom that's in the Bible,
Yeah.
but I still have a ways to go of I know of letting go, I guess, of the uh hypocrisy of those that are still out there that are preaching in this way and teaching in this way. Because I'm just like, it's not.
Hmm.
I don't want to sit here and be like, you got it all wrong. But sometimes I feel like, dude, you got it all wrong. And
Yeah. Hmm.
don't want to see you leading people astray, like
Hmm.
there's so much richness in this book. Like there's so much rich wisdom
Yeah.
in like,
It's not respected enough for the like it's, and I don't mean like because a lot of times I feel like we put the Bible on a pedestal,
mm-hmm,
and like it's not to be touched, right? Everything that's in there is everything that we need to listen to. But we don't take into account, all of the where it comes from, the translations, the things that were put in, the things that were taken out, all of that. But we don't respect the Bible in a sense of like there is wisdom, but use the wisdom. I don't want to say the right way because there's not a right way to do this, but they don't respect what it is, and they just use a sentence and lord things over people and make these sweeping statements to
yeah,
us, or people that just want to do what's right,
yeah,
you know? They
yeah,
don't take they don't take the time with it to really learn what's trying to say, or take the context, or look at it at elevation, or read the commentaries, or all of this stuff. And I mean, they just take the simple thing because they know it's what's going to get us to listen to them and to follow along.
yep,
Anyway.
yeah. It's like don't use it as a manipulation tool. Use it for the message that Jesus preached was love.
Yep.
Period.
Hmm.
When he was asked point blank, what are the two greatest commandments? He could have said anything.
Yeah.
Literally in that moment, could have said anything, but he
Yeah.
chose to say two things. And it's like, how do we miss that? Like, that to me is the essence right there is love. And
Yeah.
right, like I hate seeing it not used in that way. In I think that's to me what I told my wife when I left, she went through her own process and is still going through her own process of healing. I've always said, don't throw it all out. Like, don't throw it all out. That's the one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to throw it all out. I might need to put it on the shelf for a while, and I might need to like step away from reading it because there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain that's associated with the Bible. But don't throw it out. Like, don't throw it completely out like it's not worth anything, because there is wisdom in it, and there is a lesson of love in there. And what pains me the most, Roy, and I think this is, something that I've heard in conversation with other people that have been through different things with church and God, and even some people that you've had on here, is there's so much pain that we've all experienced, and it pains me because this book that gave me so much hope has brought so much pain to so many people,
Yeah.
when there is so much hope and love and wisdom within it, that it's one of the reasons why I'm grateful you're doing what you're doing and holding this
Mm.
podcast as a place for people to come on and talk and share and heal. Because there is so much wisdom in it, and there is so much love.
Mm.
And I don't want us all to walk away and just throw it all out, right? And just throw it all away.
Yeah.
And that's just my conviction, because I
Well, mhm. I just was gonna say, sorry to interrupt you. It's
know you're fine.
my hope is that in talking about this, because this is the thing that really, the thing that clicked in me. I don't know when this happened or how it was. But I was sharing with this because you mentioned this book. So the book, the Bible. When I realized that it wasn't God that did this, it was people, everything changed for me. It took everything. Now, once again, for those listening and people out there, the things that I've dealt with there's people that have had real trauma, real pain, real abuse
Absolutely.
that I don't want to minimize what I'm saying, but what it did was it took everything and it made it smaller because it wasn't God that was holding me down. It wasn't God that was making me feel like a piece of shit. It was somebody.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the Bible that caused me pain. It wasn't this book. It was someone who used it in a way to cause me pain.
Yeah.
But once that clicked in my brain, it was like I turned a corner. And
Mm.
so my hope is that people can feel that too, because it wasn't God that did this to us. It was people, and it was a system, and it was an institution. Um, and so because yeah, man, it was gonna be the title of my book. This can't all be bullshit, right? Like that was gonna be
Mm.
the thing. Because I was like sitting here and I'm just like it not like I can't there were some things that I learned that I'm still doing today. Like there's things that I've held on to, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that's why I say, like, you can't, I was like, that's why I say, like, you can't throw it all out. And I,
Mhm.
and I can't throw it all out. As much as I needed to walk away from that institution, so much of who I am today and why I am the father that I am, the husband that I am, is rooted in so many of the foundational things that I learned in
Yeah. Hmm.
in that organization and through the Bible, right?
Hmm.
Like, it has shaped so much of who I am and why I am the way I am, and so much of that is so positive,
Yeah.
um, so positive. I
Hmm.
it saved me from, Lord, it saved me, let's say, from a life that I didn't even want to think, a path that I would have gone down,
Hmm.
uh, if I didn't find that at that time. Um,
Yeah, man.
you know,
So We were in a cult.
I think that's a great way to just, I think that's a great way to end it in that way of asking.
Yeah,
And
we were in a cult. What do you think? Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to leave that open ended.
Sure. Okay. Well,
I think
thanks
it's a
for
good
coming
way.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story, allowing me to send it out into the internet sphere for everyone to listen to.
Yeah, man.
Thank you guys for listening and your support in this. If you are a part of the ICOC and would like to come share your story, you can reach out to me at Clemenz with a Z at gmail.com, or you can find me at the Instagram page, Clemenz with a Z, Instagram page, and you can direct message me there. Thanks again. Thank you, TJ. Thanks for coming
Thank you.
on. And until next time, guys, peace.